a dollar, a doll, and a determined heart. The city was starting to blur into itself again, just like it always did in the middle of December. The streets felt like melted silver, with honking cars and Christmas music playing from coffee shops. People walked quickly, trying to finish their shopping and beat the traffic. It was the kind of day that made even the nicest city feel like it was running away from itself. Keanu Reeves was on his way to a small book signing at a local bookstore. It was the kind of event he liked because there were no cameras or big crowds, just books and people. But traffic was bad. His driver turned into an older neighborhood near Echo Park, and that's when Keanu saw her. Not the kind of her you expect in a story like this. No glow, no fancy lights, just a little girl sitting on the sidewalk next to a bus stop. She wore a red hoodie that was way too big for her. She had a small folding table with a crate of handmade dolls. The dolls weren't fancy. They were made with mismatched thread, their hair was wild, and their button eyes weren't the same. But each doll had something special about it. They had crooked smiles that made you stop and look. Keanu rolled down his car window and watched her. She was fixing the dolls, making them look nice. A couple walked past, and she asked them, "Would you like to buy one?" They didn't stop. She didn't look sad, just a little quieter. Keanu opened the car door and walked over to the table slowly, with his hands in his coat pockets. He wasn't wearing sunglasses or with a big group of people, just a regular guy. The girl looked up at him. "They're $6, she said quickly, like she had said it a lot. "Each?" Keanu asked. She nodded, but then added, "If you buy two, I'll let you pick a third one for free." Keanu smiled. "That's a good deal." "I have to sell 12 today," she said. "Why 12? Keanu asked. She pulled out a piece of paper from her bag. It had 12 lines, each with a little heart beside it. 7 were already checked off. "I made a deal with God," she said, looking serious. "If I sell 12 dolls every day, we'll have enough money for my grandma's medicine before New Year's." Keanu blinked. "What's your name?" "Nova." "And your grandma?" "Her name's May. She's not sick all the time, just sometimes. The last treatment didn't work, but this new one has to." Keanu didn't ask how old Nova was because he could tell she was young, maybe 8 or 9, but she sounded like someone who had been carrying a lot of responsibility for a long time. "How long have you been doing this?" Keanu asked. "This is day 26 in a row," she said. "I don't go to school right now." Keanu crouched down next to the table. "Can I see one up close?" Nova handed him a doll with purple yarn hair and one eye missing. "She's not broken," Nova said quickly. "She just sees with one side, like my grandma now." Keanu bought 5 dolls. He didn't ask for a discount or change. He just put 3 bills on the table and said, "These are coming home with me." Nova smiled. It was the kind of smile people don't get to use very often. Keanu stayed a few more minutes, asking her about the dolls. Where did she learn to sew? Who picked the colors? How did she think up the names? Each doll had a name written on a little tag. "My grandma taught me when I was little," Nova said. "She still has good hands. She made them look like storybook girls." Keanu looked at the stitching, the effort, and the love put into each doll. "What do you want to be?" he asked her. Nova thought for a moment, then whispered, "I want to be the kind of person who doesn't stop." That night, Keanu didn't go to the book signing. He stayed home and looked at the dolls. He called a friend who worked in the media and said, "I need a favor. There's a girl you need to meet, and a story people need to hear." The next morning, Nova went back to her spot. Her fingers were cold, but she had a warm cup of tea and a new batch of dolls. She didn't expect anything to change. But by noon, something strange happened. People started to slow down and look. Then one woman came up with a phone in her hand. "Is this the Nova doll stand?" she asked. "The one Keanu Reeves posted about?" Nova blinked. "He posted?" she asked. Soon, more people came. By the end of the day, Nova had sold every doll. She went home with a jar full of money, not counting it, just curling up in May's lap and crying. "We're going to make it," she whispered. Keanu didn't take any credit. He didn't want people to know he helped. When people asked him, he just said, "I saw someone trying, and I stayed long enough to help others see her too." The next day, when Nova and May went back to their spot, it was different. People weren't rushing by. Instead, they stopped, asked questions, and took pictures. It wasn't like before. People were curious, not in a hurry. That afternoon, a letter came. It was from a gallery on Fairfax Avenue that showed handcrafted art. The letter said, "Dear Nova, we heard about your dolls. We would like to showcase them in our holiday window display titled Hands of Hope. We believe your work speaks louder than words. If you are interested, please contact us." May read the letter aloud. Her voice was trembling, but not from being sick. It was something new, something like hope. Later that evening, Keanu came by again. This time, he didn't wear a cap or sunglasses, though a few people recognized him. He smiled at Nova and May. They now had 2 folding chairs and a small umbrella beside the table, like a little shop. "We sold 23 today," Nova told him. "At this rate, you'll need a warehouse." Keanu laughed. "I don't want a warehouse," Nova said simply. "I just want a table, my grandma, and enough thread to finish the dolls I haven't started yet." Keanu nodded. "That's even better." May spoke next. "You've done more for us than I can say." Keanu shook his head. "All I did was sit down. You two built this." The next week, Nova and May went to the gallery. They rode in a neighbor's car, and Nova wore her best outfit, a second-hand pink dress and a mismatched sweater. She looked proud, like a queen. The gallery was different from the sidewalk. It had shiny floors and soft lights. They set up the dolls in a window display, and Nova picked out one doll with uneven braids and a missing shoe. She placed it in the middle of the display and said, "This one's named Star. She doesn't belong anywhere, so I think she should go right in the middle." The window display was launched 3 nights later. People lined up outside just to see it. The dolls weren't fancy or flashy, but there was a simple message on the glass: hope is not mass-produced. It is sewn 1 stitch at a time by hands that refuse to let go. Sales went up, but that wasn't the point. People started writing letters. Some said their kids wanted to make dolls like Nova's so no one would feel alone. One letter came from a man in Italy who said his wife used to make dolls like Nova's. "I haven't smiled in months, but looking at your dolls reminded me of her," he wrote. Nova read every letter. She didn't always understand why it was important, but she understood the feeling it gave her. Back home, May was getting better. The new medicine was working, and the doctors were hopeful. The house still needed repairs, and the money wasn't endless, but something had changed. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living. Keanu watched everything happen quietly. He didn't take the spotlight. He just helped when he could. One night, as he sat on Nova's porch with May, he said, "I didn't know one doll could do all this." May looked at him with glistening eyes and said, "It wasn't the doll. It was that you stopped. You sat down and didn't look away. That's a miracle." Keanu nodded slowly. That night, Keanu went home and wrote in his journal. It was something he didn't usually share with anyone, even his friends. "What we miss in this world is never the big things," he wrote. "We miss the little moments when we could have stopped but didn't. And when we do stop, when we really see someone, we're not just helping them. We're helping ourselves too. The next day, Nova got an invitation in the mail. It came in a crisp, white envelope with her name written in neat handwriting. Nova couldn't read the cursive at first, but then she realized it had been slipped into the doll crate at the end of the week, next to a letter from a little girl in Nevada. The envelope was from a group called Voices of Tomorrow. They helped children speak about their stories at a big event every year in Santa Barbara. The letter was short but kind. Dear Nova, it said, we believe the world needs to hear from kids who create, try, and care. Your story has reached many people, but we think your voice could reach even more. We'd love it if you would talk about your journey, your dolls, and what it means to love someone enough to keep trying. Sincerely, the Voices of Tomorrow team. Nova read it out loud once, then again. Her eyes started to fill with tears. She sat quietly, holding her sleeves in her hands. Speaking to strangers on stage into a microphone was hard for her. She barely liked talking at the grocery store. But still, there was something inside her that made her want to go. I don't think I can, she whispered that night at dinner. May nodded gently. Then don't, she said. Only go if your heart says it's time. But then Keanu stopped by with a book of poems. He smiled quietly. When Nova showed him the invitation, he read it without saying anything. Then he handed it back to her and said, I think your dolls speak louder than most people's speeches. But if you ever want to let the world hear your voice, I'll sit in the front row. No sunglasses. Nova laughed softly. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was the kind of laugh that made her feel brave. She nodded. 2 weeks later, Nova and May drove up the coast in a van. The air smelled like the ocean, warm plastic, and cinnamon. It was the first time Nova saw the ocean stretch out so far. It was huge and blue, like a question with no wrong answer. She didn't say much during the ride. She just held one of her dolls, Hope, close to her chest. It was the first doll she ever made all on her own. The event was at an art center that looked like a school gym with folding chairs and a stage built by volunteers. There were no big lights or cameras. There were just parents, social workers, and kids who had faced big challenges. Kids who lost their homes, escaped from wars, fought illness, or survived things they didn't know how to talk about. Nova was the youngest speaker. They gave her 5 minutes. Backstage, she felt her legs shake. She held her doll tight. Her heart was beating so loud she could hear it in her ears. I can't do it, she whispered to May. May crouched down beside her. You don't have to be ready, she said softly. You just have to be real. Then, Nova felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Keanu. He had arrived quietly, wearing his usual calm smile. He didn't say anything at first. He just handed her a folded piece of paper. You don't have to say every word, but maybe these will help you begin, he said. Nova opened the paper. It said one sentence. I made dolls because the world was falling apart, and I wanted to hold it together with thread. That was it. But it was enough. Nova walked up to the stage with Hope clutched in her hands. The microphone was taller than her. Someone fixed it so it would reach her. She didn't say, thank you, or hi. She couldn't speak yet. She just stared at the paper, then at the crowd. There were so many eyes, but they didn't look mean. They just looked like they were waiting and listening. She cleared her throat. My name is Nova, she said quietly. I'm 10. I started making dolls because my grandma got sick and nobody knew what to do. I don't know big words, and I didn't plan to talk in front of people. But I know how it feels when someone you love might not be here tomorrow. And I know that making something, anything, can feel like holding on. She held up Hope. This one's Hope, she said. I made her the night my grandma came home from the hospital. We didn't have enough for medicine, so I just sat on the floor and started sewing. I told her, You're not allowed to fall apart. I was talking to the doll, but maybe also to myself. The audience chuckled. Some people's eyes were already wet. Then I started selling them, Nova continued. A man sat beside me. He didn't say much, but he saw me. And that was the beginning. She looked down at her shoes for a moment, then looked up again. I didn't think I had a voice. But now I know my hands were speaking the whole time, with thread, buttons, and stitches. Maybe yours are too. So if you're scared, or sad, or don't know what to say, maybe try making something. Even if it's small, it still counts. There was silence. Then applause. At first, it was soft, but soon it became louder and deeper. Keanu clapped, his eyes shining. Nova smiled, not because it was over, but because she had done it. And nothing inside her had broken. After the event, people came to talk to her. A teacher wanted her to speak at a school. A counselor asked if she would help kids learn to sew. A mother said, "My son stopped speaking last year. I think you just helped him find his words again." Nova didn't promise anything. But she said, maybe. And that was bigger than saying yes. Back home, there were 3 letters waiting for her. One from a company that wanted to make her dolls in big factories. One from a charity that offered to help her next project. And one from a child who drew a picture of Nova on stage, holding a doll. The words on the picture said, "You made me feel less invisible." Nova hung that picture in her bedroom window. The rest of the letters could wait. That night, Nova sat on the porch with Keanu. She asked, "Was it strange to see me up there?" Keanu shook his head. "I've seen warriors. I've seen actors. I've seen rooms go quiet. But I have never seen someone stitch a story into people's hearts quite like you did today." Nova looked at her hands. They were still shaking. "They should," Keanu said. "It means you care." Then he paused. "Nova, I know this all started with your grandma, but it's growing into something else. You don't have to carry it all. But if you want to build it, if you want to make something that lasts, I'll help." Nova nodded. "I think I want to teach," she said. "Not to make dolls," she said. "To make people believe in themselves again." Keanu smiled. "That's even better." The first class was held in a small room. It wasn't much bigger than a garage, and it was at a small art center on the east side of town. The sign on the door said, "Nova's Stitch Circle," with crooked, colorful letters painted by one of the younger volunteers. Inside, there were 10 folding chairs around a table. The table had fabric scraps, safety scissors, buttons in jam jars, and lots of thread. It wasn't much, but it smelled like cinnamon, tea, and glue. It smelled like new beginnings. Nova was only 11 now, still small for her age, still struggling to zip up her coat some mornings. But the kids in the room looked at her like she was something more than her size. These were kids who had been moved between homes, kids whose voices had gotten smaller, kids who once believed they had to earn the right to be heard. Nova wasn't a miracle or a celebrity. She was just like them, but a little farther down the road. She didn't start with rules or instructions. She started with a doll. "This one is named Ember," she said, holding up a red doll with mismatched arms. "She's not perfect. Her stitches are uneven. But she reminds me of the day my grandma got sick again. I didn't know what to do. I sewed her with shaking hands. I thought she looked bad, but then someone said she looked real. And that's when I knew it was enough." She passed Ember around the circle. One by one, the kids felt the doll, its rough seams, its handmade scars. "Today, I want you to make something that tells a story without using words," she said. For a long time, no one spoke. But then, hands started to move. And that was enough. Over the next 6 weeks, the class grew. It wasn't the dolls that brought the kids back. It was space. The silence that wasn't lonely. The sound of children working quietly, sometimes laughing not because someone told a joke, but because something inside them was starting to heal. They began naming their dolls things like Storm, Wallflower, and Echo. They brought drawings, notes, and stories. They didn't speak, but they trusted Nova to read them. She never judged. She just listened. And sometimes she stitches them. Nova didn't know it yet, but this was how she started teaching healing. Not by telling kids what to feel, but by holding the room still enough so they could feel it safely. Keanu visited one Saturday. He sat in the back and watched. He didn't take pictures, didn't say anything until the kids had gone. Then he walked to the table and picked up a doll. "This one has a fight," he said. Nova smiled. "Her name's Grit. Eli made her. She's for people who've been thrown away and found again." Keanu nodded. "He's a poet." "They all are," Nova said. "They just don't know it yet." The next week, Nova was organizing her things when she saw someone standing by the door. It was a tall man, older, fidgeting and holding something wrapped in brown paper. She knew who it was even before she saw his face. It was her father. She hadn't seen him in almost 2 years, since the day he dropped her off for a weekend and never came back. After that, her grandma had called social services, and without hesitation, she stepped in to take care of Nova. Nova had learned what it felt like to be left behind without any explanation. Nova's throat tightened. She froze, holding a pair of scissors in one hand and a piece of purple cloth in the other. Her father awkwardly stepped forward and said, "Hey, Nova. You've grown." Nova didn't say anything. He looked around, clearly uncomfortable. "I saw the article. Someone showed it to me. I didn't know. I knew you made dolls, but not like this." Still, Nova didn't answer. He held out the wrapped package. "I brought this. It's one of the old ones, the first one you ever gave me. I kept it." Nova didn't take it, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know what it meant. Just then, a child across the room called her name. Nova blinked, surprised, and quickly went back to the present. "I have to go," she said simply. Her father stepped aside, his face looking a little sad. "Okay. I'm sorry," he said, but Nova didn't answer. She turned and joined the kids, her hands shaking, but she kept sewing. That night, she told May what had happened. She thought May would be upset or angry, but May just sighed and said, "You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that costs your peace." Nova nodded. But later, when the house was quiet, she opened the package her father had given her. Inside was a small, lumpy doll with yarn for hair, one button for an eye, and a crooked smile stitched in pink thread. It was the first doll she had ever made. She remembered the night she made it, after scraping her knee and taking a long bath. Her father had said, "This will protect me when I'm not with you." But then he left anyway. Still, she didn't throw it away. She gently placed it in a box under her bed, next to the letters she never sent and the apology she no longer waited for. Now, she understood something deeper. Forgiveness doesn't always mean opening a door. Sometimes, it just means closing it gently and walking away without anger. The next week, Nova brought a new doll to class. "This one's named Thorn," she said, "because sometimes the things that hurt us still become part of the garden." One girl raised her hand. "Can we make dolls for the people who hurt us?" Nova thought for a moment. "Only if it helps you heal," she said. "But you never have to carry what doesn't belong to you." That became the new motto, written on the board, taped to the wall, and printed on the back of every workshop certificate. You never have to carry what doesn't belong to you. The mural was 32 feet tall, painted on the side of a downtown building that had once been covered in graffiti and forgotten ads. It was bright and colorful, full of dolls, real ones, imagined ones, stitched together in bold lines. At the top, in a golden halo, was a portrait of a girl holding a doll to her chest, her eyes closed, her head tilted like she was listening to something no one else could hear. That girl was Nova. The mural was called The Ones Who Stayed. She didn't paint it herself. A local group of artists, inspired by the story of her Stitch Circle, had come to her with the idea months ago. At first, Nova wasn't sure about it. It felt too big, like her quiet work was being pulled into a spotlight she hadn't asked for. But May said, when your story becomes light for others, you can't always choose how far it spreads. You can only choose how gently you keep carrying it. So, Nova agreed. Now, the mural was up, and everyone was talking about it. She was invited to a fancy gala hosted by the city's cultural department. It was a private event with champagne and fancy appetizers. Adults smiled too wide and said things like, "You're such an inspiration," but they didn't really know what they were inspired to do. Nova wore a borrowed dress and shoes that pinched her feet. Her hair was pulled back, and she looked older than she felt. Keanu walked beside her, dressed plainly in black. He was always quiet in crowded rooms, making sure all the attention stayed on her. There were awards, speeches, and a slideshow showing projects Nova had helped inspire. Shelters using art for healing, schools starting creative workshops, and even a hospital where kids made dolls while they were recovering from long illnesses. When they announced her name, the applause was loud. Nova walked up to the stage, blinking against the bright lights. A woman handed her a plaque shaped like a star. Nova thanked them softly, said a few words, and didn't let her voice shake, even though inside she felt something curl up, not fear, not shame, but distance. The next morning, there were more letters, more offers. A brand wanted to use her name. A publisher sent a contract. A talk show emailed twice. Nova stared at them all, then went outside to sit on the porch with a cup of lukewarm tea. May joined her. "Are you okay, baby?" May asked. "I think I'm tired," Nova said. "Tired from what?" May asked. "From being the girl with the dolls." May looked at her carefully. "You're allowed to put the needle down for a while. You don't have to prove your heart every day." Nova whispered, "But if I stop, what if everything disappears? What if it only works because people think I'm something special?" May's hand was warm on Nova's knee. "Baby, the magic was never in the doll. It was in the way you kept going, even when no one looked. Even before they clapped. That doesn't disappear." That evening, Keanu came back. He didn't bring gifts or news. Just himself. They sat outside, under a string of lights, with the soft rustle of wind in the trees. Nova spoke first. "I don't know how to carry all of this." "You're not meant to carry it all," Keanu said. "You're meant to plant it. Let it grow where it needs to. Not everything needs your hands forever." "But what if it grows the wrong way?" Nova asked. "Then you trust the ones who learn from you to guide it back," Keanu said. Nova looked down at her lap. "Sometimes, I miss being invisible." Keanu nodded. "Fame isn't the reward. It's just the noise that shows up when you do something real." He added, "It's okay to let the world hold your story, as long as you still know where the thread began." Nova decided to step back, not from the dolls, but from the expectations. She paused new projects, turned down interviews, and focused on her circle, her classroom, the quiet work that didn't need cameras. She made a new doll during that time. It was small and plain, with no eyes, just a heart stitched where the face would be. She named it Still, and she kept it for herself. One night, a new girl came to the workshop. She didn't speak. She didn't sit at the table. Nova walked to her slowly, placed a square of cloth in her hand, and said, "You don't have to be ready. Just real." The girl started sewing, and a tear fell. No one mentioned it. They just kept stitching, because healing doesn't always happen loudly. Sometimes it moves like a needle through fabric, steady, invisible at first, but strong enough to hold everything together. Nova had rebuilt her stand. It had been a year since she first sold a doll on the corner of Sunset and Vine. The city had grown louder, bigger, brighter. People knew her name now. They recognized her face. They sent her emails, awards, and quoted her words. The girl with the dolls had become a legend. But legends are stories told from the outside. Nova remembered the inside, the weight, the fear, the hope that existed in that broken booth, with a borrowed chair and a crooked plastic table. She hadn't just built dolls. She had built proof that love could still show up, even when money didn't, and that even the smallest person could leave a mark that couldn't be swept away. When the city offered her a small grant for public art and youth programs, Nova didn't use the money to build a bigger studio or hire a team. She didn't make a brand or a foundation. She took the money and said, "I want to go back to the sidewalk." People didn't understand. Her team tried to talk her out of it. The area had changed. The press wouldn't follow her there. It wasn't safe. But Nova shook her head. It's not about the press. It's about presence. The new stand wasn't fancy. It was built with wood from an old church, sanded smooth by a carpenter who used to live in the shelter nearby. The dolls were hung on tiny hooks made from twisted paper clips. There was no price tag, no sales pitch, just a handwritten sign that said, "Free if you need it. 6 if you want to help. Sit down if you want to stitch." Beside the stand was a bench wide enough for 2 people. Keanu had built it with his own hands, quietly, one weekend when no one was looking. He carved something into the wood, but Nova didn't notice until the second week. "Hope sat here." "So did I." She traced the words with her fingers, smiled, and said nothing. Then the kids came. Not in crowds, just 1 or 2 at first. Then more. Some brought cloth, some brought silence, and some brought stories. One girl came with her brother. He couldn't speak, but he sewed faster than anyone. One boy came with scars on his arms and said, "I want to make something that doesn't hurt." Nova gave him the softest fabric she had, and when he left, he said, "I might come back tomorrow." Another girl, barely older than Nova had been when it all started, asked, "Are you really her?" Nova said, "I'm still becoming." On the third weekend, something strange happened. A woman walked by, stopped, stared at the dolls, and then sat down without asking. She didn't sew, and she didn't speak. But after a long silence, she whispered, "My daughter used to make these." She pulled out a tiny, ragged doll from her purse. It was faded, frayed, and loved until the edges were no longer edges. "She passed 3 years ago," the woman said. "She used to sell them at school. They were protection charms." Nova took the woman's hand and didn't say anything. The woman cried. The doll stayed on the table for hours, and every child who came by touched it gently. No one needed to be told why. The mayor visited and stood awkwardly near the bench. He said, "We want to name this space after you." Nova shook her head. "No. Name it after the kids who sat here. Name it the Stitch Circle, so it never belongs to just one person." The mayor nodded, and that's what they did. Keanu came by often. He didn't stay long. Sometimes he brought snacks. Sometimes he brought nothing but himself. One day, he sat down and watched Nova help a new child thread a needle. Then he said, "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were brave for trying." Nova looked at him. "And now I think you're brave for staying." She paused, then said, "It's easier now because it's familiar." "No," Keanu said, "because it's not about you anymore." And that was the truth. The dolls still mattered, but the story had shifted. This wasn't about charity or even healing. It was about making room. Room for stories, room for silence, and room for people to sit and feel, even for just a moment, that they weren't alone. When the kids came back week after week, with new stitches, new dolls, new names, and new wounds, Nova didn't try to fix them. She just offered thread and let them pull it through at their own pace. On the 1-year anniversary of the day it all began, Nova returned to the original sidewalk, with just one doll in her hand. It was plain and simple, with brown yarn hair and no eyes, but a heart sewn in gold thread into its chest. She named it Root. Then, she sat down beside it. No cameras. No speeches. Just Nova, a doll, and the sidewalk that had once held all her fear. She whispered, "Thank you. If you liked this story, tell me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more fun adventures and mysteries. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video."